So a little background. Some of you might know of an organization called Community Forest International. Um, they uh, they reached out to me a couple of years ago and said, Sean, we'd really like to have more companies capable. We find there's a lot of interest from the land base to do more ecological forestry, but there's a breakdown when it comes to implementation. And so we'd like to help your help in designing a training program that could enable more operators to move into that space. And from being an operator in that space, and it's a pretty lonely space with the implementing ecological forestry. I think I had some ideas as to why, um, and it wasn't necessarily training, as in training wouldn't be the linchpin that would unlock opportunities for operators to be successful implementing ecological forestry at scale, and suggested we did a gap analysis of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick uh, to better understand what the actual issue was with implementing ecological forestry. And some highlights that came out of that study, and we actually went and met with contractors all across the Maritimes and did 4-hour interviews to understand what their capabilities were, those that have tried ecological forestry, what their struggles were, what their current operational challenges were, market challenges. And the key findings were that um, it wasn't necessarily about training, it was about support and market condition. And so when there's a lot of forces that are pushing operators and even eventually landowners to make the decision to do short rotation, often clear-cut dominated forestry. There's less risk, there's less planning, there's less complexity, more revenue, and less cost. And what we specifically were made aware of through those interviews was that most clear-cut contractors, they were mostly machine operators. Some might have a forestry, like a professional forestry background. They were really skilled at what they were doing, but a lot of those skill sets were more about operating machinery, not forest planning, and specifically not operational forest planning that would enable ecological forestry to take place successfully. And so when you show up to a block that needs to be clear cut, you basically need to understand where the boundaries are, and that you're going to be able to get those products to market. When you show up to an ecological forestry job, and especially if you want to be successful on the ecological outcomes, you need to know so much more about that site, and a lot more planning goes into that. And then the interface uh, of the operators and even the economics of the operation are way more complex on those interventions. And so we found access to technology, operational planning were huge missing gaps. And then obviously the economic benchmark for getting product to mill, which funds all these interventions typically, or is the line share funding, are based on productivity values associated with clear cutting. And so coming out of that, I realized, hey, I wonder if we could deploy a solution that would enable that we built an act for to enable to enable us to do ecological forestry for other operators. What would that look like? And how would we verify the outcomes so that we can create value around those outcomes? And so that some of that has come into how we've founded Loupra and what we're up to now. To to speak about this in another way, the forestry sector, and especially the forestry sector, when we talk about privately held forests, is really fragmented. A lot of small ownerships, um, relatively disconnected landowners. I guess maybe when you benchmark to other developed forest instances of privately held forests. Like if you even there's one example of that is in New Brunswick where we engage with a lot of small private landowners. There's a wealth of data associated with people's woodlots that most woodlot owners never get access to in a way that they can understand it. And so it's publicly funded data. It can help them understand their woodlot and make key management decisions, but they will never see that data, and they will specifically never see it in a way that they can understand it or access that as a support for decision making in the management of their woodlot, and to make decisions of why should I manage for ecological values, or like is this just a short-term cash flow vehicle for me? And so I when I use the word disconnected, it's not necessarily speaking about how much people care about their forests, because I think people do care about their forests often, but maybe disconnected in the sense of they're not accessing the information that they could be, and it's not in a way that they could really leverage that to help them. Relatively informal workflow. So a lot of the contractor workflows are word of mouth, a lot of door knocking, looking for green spots, relatively lo-fi. Like it's not like people like contractors are getting more advanced in understanding wood chance that exists on the land base, but it's mostly that's a large workflow that exists. And then second to that, or maybe even more than that, like sawmills are buying stumpage or initiating harvest interventions on a small private land base. And I should clarify, when I talk about small private land base, I'm mostly talking about the private land base that's not owned by the government or not managed by the government, and isn't owned by a sawmill. I'm mostly talking about it in that way. That's the instances that it makes the most sense here. And then supply uncertainty, like typically that's less important to the conversation today, but private land supply, it's hard for like the margins are really tight in ecological forestry. And so having a reliable market is really important. And then a market that appreciates the type of management that produces products from ecological sources. That's almost non-existent. So there's no market differential if you go in and pin to pin strip a 40-year-old vigorous forest to somebody that carefully manages that and just takes opportunities to take declining stems out and protect and favor climate smart, climate resilient species that have lots of growth. There's no differentiator that the market will pay more for one product or another. This is all at a time where there's more pressures and on forests and forest management. So there's rising expectations around traceability and sustainability reporting, which I think is a good thing. I think that's where there might be some leverage to implement ecological forestry and verify the outcomes associated with it. So I think the emerging markets and where more demand is coming into the forest sector are around more than physical characteristics of a tree. So rather than only sawmills looking for a tree that makes good studwood, the emerging markets, especially ones that are invested in for some sort of climate attribute, like fuel switching, or like the bioeconomy to use forest derived products as a low carbon alternative to fossil fuels. There's a need to demonstrate that reasonable forestry practice, or at least forestry practice that hasn't degraded climate attributes in the forest, was being practiced in the production of their feedstocks. And so I think that policy is catching up to that a bit. I don't know that there's like any that hasn't turned around to industry paying or supporting ecological forestry or climate smart forestry in existing markets today, but I could see it going that way. And I think that might be a really interesting opportunity to help fund or incentivize more ecological forest outcomes and operations. Just a quick, I think there is lots of forestry tech, but it's typically individual tools like GIS and mapping software, harvester technology, planning software, inventory systems. I think where things fall apart is there's not a lot of connectivity to all those systems. And I think, for instance, when we did that gap analysis, we were benchmarking. I had always, when I was talking to other contractors, what Act4 did, and we invested often and we really valued having a good planning team, good access to technology that flowed from forest inventory planning, operational level planning into harvesters, so you could see all that information, and then into post-treatment validation of ecological outcomes and straight into the market, and then a feedback loop on that whole system. We worked really hard to have that because we didn't have the luxury of larger margins that clear-cut contractors would have. We often had to pay for that planning service and try and recover it in wood sales. We like our margins were way smaller relative to the overall investment in the operations. And so a system that connected from that planning stage, the inventory stage, straight through to operations, we found that as one of the enabling features that allowed us to maybe implement ecological forestry at scale. And so I'm trying not to turn this into, I think we developed a solution that kind of met that end. So I hope this doesn't come across as some sort of sales pitch. I'm not trying to sell you anything. We're just excited about, I think how we've built a solution that enables more ecological forestry. And I'll talk about a few modules that I think does that well. And so I'm going to show a bit of a demo of some of these tools as well, so you get a chance to see what it is, what these look like. So Extend, when I mentioned that a lot of landowners never actually access the information that's out there, that could potentially help them understand why they might choose to do more ecological forestry, at least, and also balance decisions around, okay, I'm willing to give up less short-term revenue for more carbon storage or better surface water management, or it's really tough. Like a lot of people that solicit harvest operations with landowners often tell them what they want to hear, but there's not good. I feel like there's a lack of good data, good information based on real data sets that landowners can consume and trust in a way that they can consume that information. And so Extend, we built that as that front. So a landowner can now access the same type of information that maybe some of our clients that own 20,000 hectares can access. Like when we have a multiple professionals supporting a 20,000 hectare forest owner, they can get some real insights on management decisions that oftentimes lead them to more long-term decisions, like favoring better long-term decision making around partial harvests and some of those ecological outcomes. And so we've tried to build an ability for all, let's say 40,000 woodlot owners in Nova Scotia access that information. And then Fractional Forester, when we did that gap analysis, I remember being like, a lot of these, the problem is a lot of these operators can't support economically going out and hiring a full-time forester to have in their staff. And I found operational level planning for ecological interventions was a rare skill set. That wasn't a super common skill set, especially detailed operational planning that contractors would trust the economics. Because in order for an intervention to move forward, you can have a wonderful prescription, but until the money makes sense, until the operator knows that they're going to be compensated for their time to be out there, they just won't move forward. And so it's not only that those ecological considerations are being well understood, but there needs to be financial rigor so that it's not a one. That's what we found with a lot of contractors. They said, yeah, I tried one and I lost a lot of money and I'm not going to try another one. Like, so you need somebody that's grounded in like production values, market realities, product classes. And so we've tried to build that here so that it moves on to forest professionals and maybe a fractional one, because maybe a one harvester, like an owner operator harvester circumstance, can't afford a full-time forester, can't afford the technology stack associated with supporting that forester, so that they could in turn push that into the organization. And so that's where Fractional Forester came into mind. And then the last one I'll touch on is Forest Ledger. This is the vehicle that measures the outcomes related to ecological or climate smart forestry. And so there won't be systems that value the outcomes until they're measured and verified. It is our thesis. And so like we've created systems to measure studwood moving into a mill yard. It's typically a mass scale, and people get paid based on that. Until we come up with a vehicle that measures outcomes in a way that there's not people over-claiming or potentially bad actors suggesting that they are achieving those outcomes, I don't know that we'll have an ability to scale those outcomes. And so Forest Ledger is set up as a vehicle to measure those outcomes. Just going to move into a bit of a demo of Loupra Extend. So this is, imagine a woodlot owner logging in, they're entering their civic address, and right away it pops up their forest inventory. So they can add as many properties as they want. And one thing I want to point out right away here, and we're just giving some examples of the way that we're looking to use this tool, is one area of interest that people want to communicate to woodlot owners that may be a decision support is wildfire risk. And so there's a lot of talk about wildfire risk, and I think that there's maybe been people talk about it very generally, and I think that talking about it specific, if we can move the conversation to specifically what has high wildfire risk, and maybe providing a little bit more context as to what that risk means from a woodlot owner perspective. I feel like sometimes there's some fear mongering associated with wildfire risk, and so I find here we tried to identify early on. Part of Act 4 does wildfire modeling for municipalities and large regions, and we wanted to be able to produce some of those results so a woodlot owner could understand when those conditions might be present. Similarly, we now have a feature that shows where high conservation value exists on a forest. And so when the woodlot owner logs in, they get a bit of a, hey, there's either high wildfire risk, or hey, there's really high conservation, or maybe there's like a high chance of species at risk on your property. So bubbling up important information that they might want to be aware of. So a bit of a tour for the woodlot owner to understand what's existing. So in New Brunswick, there's an interest in engaging with more woodlot owners. And so there's a free extension consultation, a 2 hour that's being talked about. And so it's a vehicle for woodlot owners that have a near-term intervention, like a potential ecological intervention, or any intervention that they could have a free consultation. And so the system is looking to say, oh yeah, this person meets the criteria of someone that might need to make a management decision. Let's give them a consultation right away. So human in the loop a bit earlier here, whereas maybe a landowner without a near-term intervention, they wouldn't necessarily get this pop-up for a consultation. And so this is an opportunity for a woodlot owner to express their concerns and start engaging with a professional. And so this is more of a connected, a way that it could be a bit more connected to practitioners. This is, oh, sorry about that. So this is, this section is where the landowner starts seeing, so we tried to produce metrics which we think woodlot owners might be interested in. So you can see estimated timber profit, carbon credit value. Like we've just bubbled out a few in this instance. This is really customizable, and can kind of see 50-year trends. I think one thing through my time working with private forest owners is I feel like I've checked a box when I can help them understand how decisions today can result in a forest in 50 years. Like if I can transport them from, if you make these decisions today, this is what your forest could look like, or these are some of the outcomes that could be achieved in 50 years. It's challenging to get people to care about 50 years from now, especially with a relatively, I don't want to use the word elderly, but a senior woodlot owner population. I'm talking beyond their lifespan most of the time. So to get them interested in a 50-year horizon, and then and then transport them back to now to be like, these are the decisions that you need to make to get to maybe restore your forest in the next 50 years. And so this interface is kind of set up to help do that. You can see we try and encourage the landowner to set objectives, and these are also evolving, but they can see the real time. They can see the real time outcome of setting those values, and so we're trying to show metrics like biodiversity, carbon storage, the amount of emissions, wildfire risk. So these other non-monetary values that people might be interested in, for them to have other metrics to measure against short-term or early-term revenue from harvesting all their trees at once. So it allows them to toggle back and forth. They can look at different values, and it's meant for them just to get in here and play and see kind of that if I do this now, this is what happens in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And allows a woodlot owner to do a little bit of discovery independently. So the tool is kind of suggesting near-term work that they might want to consider on their property, because I think that's the other thing with ecological forestry is timing really matters. We end up oftentimes, the ACFOR group ends up missing those opportunities. Like when you get to a 50-year-old balsam fir spruce stand, there's nothing often in a lot of sites left to retain, as in the trees are all just about to like have a full stand replacing event, and many interventions are now off the table. Whereas if that woodlot owner knew that there was an intervention that could have happened at year 30, then they're starting to like work their way down that ecological forestry pathway. And so this tool is meant to prompt better timing as well. So just again, that information that the woodlot owner learns about themselves and who they are, they can send that along to a practitioner, so that they can understand what the woodlot owner has interest in. They can, again, this is an educational vehicle, so they can actually see their stands in 3 dimension, and understand what those different treatments look like. There's notifications related to, here's some programming that will support that non-clear cut intervention, or other type of silviculture. And this may seem like a little bit like gimmicky or silly, but a lot of landowners don't even know what a thinning is, um, or like a gap shelter would. And so we're trying to give them ability to see that visually. There's an LLM embedded. And what's interesting about this is we can we've been training the LLM on regionally relevant data sets and sources of information. So we can bring in Anthony Taylor's research on climate smart forest management. It's also looking at that woodlot owner's inventory. And so different than if they just started talking to ChatGPT. ChatGPT's like not really set up to look at their forest inventory relative to local market condition, local research. And so a way to bring research to a woodlot owner's to support a woodlot owner's decisions and have a way for them to understand that research. It's just showing that most woodlot owners that we would work with probably don't have a laptop, and so trying to make it accessible in both languages and on mobile so that they can receive this information on mobile. I'm going to jump over to Fractional Forester here, and I might even click through a little bit for time's sakes. But this is where that forest professional can then receive a request for either management consultation or operations of some sort. And so again, connecting the woodlot owner's understanding and values to a forester so they can see a similar view to what the woodlot owner, they can see the woodlot owner's values, but they can't change them. And so that's one thing that we thought was an interesting thing to include. Is there's this idea that like most of the people initiating forest harvest in the Maritimes are sawmills. And so the people that are contacting woodlot owners and working with contractors to implement operations, they're people that have a particular interest in a forest product, maybe not so much in ecological outcomes. And so we thought it was really interesting to allow a woodlot owner to kind of soul search a little bit with their inventory and their objectives, and then lock that in a bit so that the woodlot owner can go back and change that. But there's a timestamp and a record of being like, hey, this woodlot owner was really interested in biodiversity. And you'll see later how that is an important measure against a planning process of did this plan align with a woodlot owner's objectives, or did something change? So there's an AI function in the planning process. So you're seeing a forester now do some planning for that woodlot owner, and it was just catching that there might have been some interventions missing in that plan. They can import. Oh, so this is the alignment score. And so what the tool's detecting is that the management plan the forester's creating doesn't have a very good alignment with the woodlot owner. And so I think in this case, it's suggesting changing clear cuts that were suggested by the forester to selection harvest to better align with that woodlot owner's objectives. And that score is transferred back to the woodlot owner as well. So they have a bit of an idea to be like, hey, this plan really aligns with my values. So they might not be, so they have an ability to track if what they're interested in is being respected, which I think yeah, so then there's an ability to submit that back in a connected way for the woodlot owner to see their management plan. We're building it to take in all sorts of different data sources. One thing of note that I will mention here is that when I mentioned the ability to measure ecological outputs from a forest management perspective, that can be pretty expensive in itself, the measurement aspect. And if we're building a solution to scale, I think we need to look at ways for us to know more about forestry outcomes at scale. And so we're working on building harvester head data so that the data that a harvester head produces both spatially and tree characteristics, using that as a verification tool to tie that to a product that moves through the market as a low cost uh, uh, measurement, reporting, and verification data source. Um, yeah, I'm going to jump forward here. So again, I mentioned that the contractor being connected to that planning piece and to the woodlot owner is a barrier to implementing these sorts of things. And so the woodlot owner has an ability to educate themselves a little bit and work with foresters. The forester has an ability to create that plan. And this is where we're handing it off to contractors, so that that ability for contractors to tap into more information and more planning resources that they otherwise were missing. And so here you can see they've had a request to quote a forest operation. The tool's actually looking at that contractor's last several jobs to understand financial considerations like productivity values, market revenue, those sorts of things, so that they can quickly say, yeah, I can do this job, it's feasible. And so kind of allows a lot of these calculations we wouldn't have seen any contractors we interviewed able to use to leverage those data sets to help them make these calculations. And so this was a tool to help contractors be a little bit more okay with complex forest operations. So more refined economic analysis for them to maybe better understand that. This is a map where contractors can see management opportunities across the land base. So one thing that we think might happen is if there's a lot of ecological interest from landowners and that's being made known across the land base, that might support people getting into the business and like if woodlot owners are really interested in ecological forestry, and now there's an ability for that to be showcased across the across the land base and contractors say, hey, if I could just do these treatments, um, and I already know where they already know what they want. Here's an ability for me to connect to those treatments, and there's a service to provide there. And so we kind of thought this was an interesting way, one, to just reduce cost on matching woodlot owners with the people that can provide them services, but two, demonstrate that demand for maybe a different type of forestry at scale. There's one last little demo. This one's pretty short, but this is the like land-based level. How do we look for opportunities for climate? I will maybe mention that this is particularly, there's definitely some overlap between ecological forestry from the way that I would articulate ecological forestry and climate aligned or climate smart forestry. And this is really driven by climate attributes. So looking at things like carbon storage, emissions, climate resilience. So shifting species to more climate resilient species, and even getting into some products and carbon storage and products over time. Wildfire, it looks at that. But lots of similarities to ecological forestry. And this is an analysis we just ran on. It's been run on all of Nova Scotia. And so basically what Forest Ledger is doing is looking at an entire region, using that inventory to look for all the opportunities where climate smart forestry could create a benefit, where there's an opportunity to do an intervention that would improve climate values in the forest. And then oftentimes those will produce some sort of product. And so the idea is, again, to scale an opportunity here and pay for it is, let's say there's a sustainable aviation fuels market coming online, or maybe a biomass consumer, that their entire investment decision is based on climate outcomes. And so when a power plant switches from coal to biomass, it's not because biomass is cheaper. Coal's way cheaper than biomass at like, if you think about the upfront investment and then the operational cost. Um, and so the reason why the investment's being made is for the climate outputs. And so we're trying to tie when people right now, I think people hide behind broad policies that give biomass account for biomass emissions lower than maybe what they often should be. And so this tool is saying in these instances, it does make sense. In these instances, it doesn't. And so being a bit more specific on the land base. And so we analyzed those opportunities across Nova Scotia, and then looked at the delta between climate smart management and business as usual forest management, and looked at standing volume, climate resilience, wildfire risk. So what happens if we actually care about climate outcomes in the forest? What could we achieve, and if we actually valued those outcomes? And so trying to put a number to that, because we find our guess is that if we're able to put a number to it and verify that it's happening, then that's where we can start to incentivize it in the market maybe a bit more. I'm going to stop there and maybe open up for questions. I should say, to open it up, we are really interested in feedback at this stage. You can probably understand what we're trying to do